start. Okay, we're going to start from Daf Mem Hey Amud Sheni, about 9 lines from the bottom. But I'm going to just point out, we got to remember this, the Gemara, that pretty famous Gemara from before, from yesterday's Daf, if you had a chance to let it sink in, that he said, I love this statement, that Omar Chizkiya, Omar Rab Yirmiyah, Rab Shimon ben Yochai, Yochel ani lifter es kol ha'olam kulei min adin. Rab Shimon ben Yochai said, I suffered so much in my life that I could atone everybody from and exempt anybody from getting punishment. In other words, a person does an avera, a sin, he's supposed to get punished. He said, I suffered enough for people that from the day that the world was created until now. In other words, I took the suffering from all the people. And then he said, if I add my son Eliezer with me, it's from the day that the world was created until now. Hi, Louis. We didn't start yet. We're just moving.
So he's saying that nobody should be punished, that he suffered for everyone, therefore others should be punished?
That no one should be any punishment. Any avera that you did from the time that the world was created, miyom shenivra olam, ad sofer, till the end of time, I suffered together with my son, together with this king of Judah, Yosim ben Uziel. All three had such suffering in life that they can exempt the entire world from any avera, and any avera that you did, they can exempt through their suffering.
Yeah,
it's
so that was Rabbi Eliezer, his son, and who else?
Rab Shimon ben Yochai, and his son Eliezer.
Right.
And then he adds on, but you need this king of Judah called Yosim ben Uziel, a figure in Tanakh.
Yeah.
So all three of us had imagined the suffering of somebody who went through the Holocaust. So lahavdil, but in a certain way, Rab Shimon ben Yochai is saying, I suffered much, much more, that anybody who does any avera from the beginning of the creation till the end of creation, they wouldn't have to suffer with punishments, because I suffered on their behalf, so to speak. And for this reason, that's the reason why people would go to his caver during the Lag BaOmer for the atonement of what he's just said. It's very hard. It's a hard Gemara to understand. How could somebody suffer for somebody else? That's not a Jewish thing.
And why do you mention the Holocaust? I don't understand that.
Oh, he's saying, you imagine somebody who went through the Holocaust. So he suffered a lot. But Rab Shimon ben Yochai is saying, I suffered, even more, And anybody who did an avera from the beginning of time till the end of time, I took it for them. Wow. And they would not have to be punished for that. So just by mentioning Rab Shimon ben Yochai's name automatically brings about atonement. And it's nice to learn a Gemara like that right before, as we approach Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and things like that.
One final question, which Gemara is that again?
This is the Gemara Memhei Amud Sheni, a little bit above from where we're starting. We're starting from Memhei Amud Beis, about 9 lines from the bottom. Here we go. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Lulav Shiva Sukka Yom Echad. What he's saying is that Lulav, for the 7th day, every day you take the Lulav during Sukkot, you make a bracha, right? Al Netilas Lulav. But Sukkah Yom Echad. Sukkah, all you make is a Leisha Basukah on the first day of Sukkot, and you don't make a Leisha Basukah anymore. So the Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason? So the Gemara answers, Lulav the Mifsaki Leilus Miyamim, that since you interrupt night times from the daytimes, in other words, there's no mitzvah of lulav at night. There's only to do it once in the morning. So every day of the 7 days of Sukkot is a brand new mitzvah. Kol yom mitzvah v'apei nafshehu. Every day is a brand new mitzvah. Therefore, you make a new bracha every single day. Sukkah the loy mifsaka leilos miyamim. By Sukkah, there's no interruption night from day. That means really, technically, a person's supposed to sleep and eat in the Sukkah and not leave the Sukkah. So Kula Shiva Kechad Yom Arichadami. So all 7 days is like one day. And therefore, Shmuel said that on you make a bracha, Leisha B'Sukkah, only the first day, and that's it. So Rabba Bar Bachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Sukkah Shiva, the opposite. He just said just the polar opposite of what Shmuel said. He said, Sukkah, the bracha of Sukkah, Leisha B'Sukkah, you make it once a day, every day, not just once a day, but every time you come into the Sukkah after an interruption, let's say you went to work or something like that, you make a new bracha Leisha B'Sukkah when you begin a meal. V'lulav yom echad. And lulav, you make one day a bracha for the lulav, and that's it. So the Gemara says, my tama, what was the reason, Rabbi Yochanan? So he says, Sukkah daraisa shiva. Sukkah really is min Torah, therefore you make a bracha 7 days. Now, that's not really a reason. Of course, Shmuel held Sukkah was daraisa. But the point is that Sukkah, it's a mitzvah, and every time you start the mitzvah and you interrupt the mitzvah, you have to make a new bracha. But lulav, the rabbanim, lulav, the 6 days of Sukkot, besides the first day of Sukkot, is only a mitzvah the rabbanim. Rabbi Yochanan held by mitzvahs the rabbanim, mitzvahs that the rabbanim gave you, you don't make a bracha. Sagilei b'chad yomid. Therefore, you make a bracha the first day. It's enough because the first day, of course, of taking a lulav is daraisa. You make a bracha that first day. The rest of the 6 days, Rabbi Yochanan did not hold that you make a bracha on a mitzvah the rabbanim. He asked Ravin Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he learned in the yeshiva Rabbi Yochanan. He had a different version of what Rabbi Yochanan said. He said, Echad zeh ve'echad zeh shiva, whether it's sukkos, leisha b'sukkah, whether it's making a bracha on lulav, shiva, you make what? A bracha every single day on the lulav, and every time you go into the sukkah, you make a new bracha if you had an interruption. Amar Rav Yosef said, "Nekoit Rabba Babachana biyadach." When it comes to the sukkah, you always make a bracha and paskin like Rabba Babachana. The kuli amaroi kaime kavosei b'sukkah. Everybody agrees to what Rabba Babachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan regarding the mitzvah of sukkah. Regarding Rabba Babachana said that Rabbi Yochanan said sukkah shiva. Sukkah is a bracha every single day. So, and Ravin, who came from the same yeshiva, also said that Sukkah is 7 days. So, regarding Sukkah, we establish one fact that according to Rabbi Yochanan, all 7 days of Sukkahs, you should make a new bracha every time you have an interruption. So, basically, we have a machlokes between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan regarding the mitzvah Sukkah. According to Shmuel, Sukkah, you make one bracha and that's it. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you make many brachas. Every time you sit down to eat, you make a new bracha of Leisha B'Sukkah. Comes along the Gemara, Meisvei. I'll ask you a question. We go to the top of page Memvav Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, the Brisa says, Ha'oisa lulav la'atzmai. A man ties a lulav for himself, right? He's working on tying the lulav, putting the hadassim in and the aravas in on the first day. He didn't go to shul yet. He's just preparing the lulav. Omer, he says, Baruch Shachiyanu b'kimanu b'giyanu lazman hazeh. He makes a Shachiyanu because he's preparing the lulav. The Brisa says, Nitali lotzis boy, when he comes to shul and he wants to shake the lulav in Esrik, Omer, he says, this is of course the first day, Baruch Hashek Yisham Tzaisim Tzivanu al Netilas lulav. And you make a bracha on Netilas lulav. Says the Brisa, Va'afal pisha birich olav yom rishon, even though you make a bracha on lulav 1 day, every single day you make a new bracha on the lulav. So here already you have a question against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said that the lulav you make one bracha because the rest of his sukkahs it's only a drabanan. So therefore you make a bracha only the first day and you don't make it all 7 days. Here we have a brisa which was written by Tanoim, which Rabbi Yochanan cannot argue on. Says explicitly that even though you make a bracha of lulav first day, you make a bracha all 7 days. Then the brisa is this is going to be a double jeopardy brisa, the double question brisa. The brisa continues. If you make a sukkah for yourself, you say Baruch Shachiyanu v'kimanu lazman hazeh. When you're making a sukkah, just by making a sukkah, you make a Shachiyanu. Nichnas, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah. The Torah expresses Chag HaSukkah's Taselecha. The Torah says you should make the sukkah somewhat. So when you're making the sukkah, even during the weekdays, let's say it's a week before Sukkot, and you're making a sukkah, according to the Tanoic opinion over here, which technically we could paskin like that, you would make a shechiyonu that way, and that already is considered the shechiyonu on the yontiv because you're making this. Stosis explained, you're making the shechiyonu because you're going to sit in the sukkah. Then comes the first night of Sukkot, nichnas leisheba. When you come to sit in the first night of Sukkot, oimer asher kiddushanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu leisheba. So God commanded us to sit in the sukkah. And here the Brisa says regarding the mitzvah sukkah, the kevan sheberech yom rishon shuv eina barach. When you make a bracha on sukkah on the first day, you don't make a bracha the rest of sukkahs. A sukkah bracha is first day, and then you don't make any new bracha. So here is the double jeopardy question. Kasha lulav alujlav. It's a question lulav versus lulav. Here the Brisa says lulav, you should make a bracha every 7 days, all 7 days. And Rabbi Yochanan said you make a lulav, since it's only Rabbanim, you make a lulav only for the first day. Kasha sukkah, it's a question against Rabbi Yochanan from sukkah. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion was sukkah, you make a bracha all 7 days. Every day of the 7 days, anytime you're coming in to eat in the sukkah, you make a new bracha. Here the Brisa says you make Asher K'Sham B'Sukkah on the first day. You don't have to make a bracha anymore. So the Gemara answers, Bishlam, it makes perfect sense. Lulav like kasha. I have no question. I can resolve that difficulty between lulav and lulav. It's not a stira. It's not a difficulty against Rabbi Yochanan. Kan bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayim. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, then all 7 days of Sukkot, the lulav was a daraisa. Because remember, during the Beis Hamikdash, in the shul in the Beis Hamikdash, they actually brought their lulav all 7 days. So therefore, the Brisa holds, since lulav all 7 days when the Beis Hamikdash was around was a mitzvah daraisa, therefore you make a bracha every day. Kan, here, what Rabbi Yochanan was referring to, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Bisman she'ein Beis Hamikdash time, when there is no Beis Hamikdash, and therefore, since there is no mitzvah, there is no Beis Hamikdash, therefore there's only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds you don't make a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So that resolves the difficulty between lulav and lulav. Ela sukkah kasha, but sukkah to sukkah is a difficulty. Rabbi Yochanan said you make a bracha all the 7 days of sukkahs, the mitzvah leisha b'sukkah. And here the Brisa says, as soon as the first day you make a leisha b'sukkah, but then you don't have to make any more leisha b'sukkah. That is a difficulty, and Rabbi Yochanan is not permitted to disagree with a Tanoic Brisa. So the Gemara answers Tanoihi. The answer is there is a machlekes Tanoim, and Rabbi Yochanan has a Tana that's on his side. The Tana that is on his side is Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rebbe. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Tefillin, the Tefillin, calls man shemenichen mevarach aleim. Every time you put them on, you have to make a new bracha. Divrei Rebbe, that's the words of Rebbe. That means if you go to the bathroom and you take off your tefillin, when you come back on, you have to make a new bracha. And that's similar to the mitzvah of sukkah. So that means that you leave the sukkah and you go to work. When you come back and begin a new meal, according to Rebbe, you would have to make a brand new bracha. So Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is Rabbeinu HaKadosh. You only make a bracha one time a day on your tefillin, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan is not going according to Chachamim. That Brisa is going according to Rabbi Chachamim. That sukkah you make a bracha one day, and you don't have to make it anymore. Like tefillin, you make it in the morning, and you never have to make the bracha. But Rabbi Yochanan held like Rebbe that just like by tefillin, every time there's an interruption in your tefillin for whatever reason, you took a shower or whatever, you couldn't wear your tefillin. So when you re-put it back on, you have to make a new bracha. So whenever there's a interruption in your mitzvah of sukkah, when you go back to the sukkah, you have to make a new bracha. Itmar, it was taught. Abaya Amar Hilchas Rebbe. The halacha is like Rebbe, and like what we do, is that every time you put your tefillin on, you make a new bracha. Every time you go into the sukkah, you make a new bracha to eat. V'Rabba Amar Hilchas Rabbanan. Rava initially held, I say, that the halacha is like Rabbanan, that the bracha of sukkah, you make only once. You never have to make it again. So the Gemara continues, Omar Rav Mori brought the Bas Shmuel. Rav Mori said who Mori is the son of the daughter of Shmuel. Rav Mori. Now, why is he called this Rav Mori is the son of the daughter of Shmuel, not the son of Shmuel's son-in-law, because the Shmuel's son-in-law was a goy originally. And he during, as the Gemara tells us, or Rashi brings the story, that she actually raped with the daughter of Shmuel, and then the daughter of Shmuel convinced him to become a ger. His name was Isser, so he became a ger. So Mari was the daughter of Shmuel was pregnant with Mari during the time that her husband was still a goy. And so he was Hayrasai Shaloi Bikdusha, but he was born Bikdusha. So therefore, we always refer to Mari as the son of the daughter of Shmuel. Anyway, he said, Mari Chazina Leila Rava. I saw Rava, the loy of a Kishmaitse. He did not follow his own teaching, because Rava's teaching was that tefillin, you make a bracha once and you don't have to make anything anymore, like the Chachamim. When he woke up in the morning, he washed his hands and went to the bathroom. The nafik, and then he left. Umasha yad, and he washed his hand. Umanach tefillin, he put on the tefillin. Umavarach made the bracha like normal, like the beginning of the day. But as he wore the tefillin, when he needed to use the restroom again, he went up to the base akise, v'nafak, and then he left. Umasha yad, and he washed his hand. Umanach tefillin, and he put the tefillin. Umavarach, and he made a new bracha. So even Rava sort of switched his mind. And va'anan name kerebi avdinam. We also will do like Rebbe, umevarchin kol shiva, and we paskin like Rebbe, and we'll see many other, or even Rav will hold as well, and Shmuel holds as well, that sukkah is a bracha for every single day. Every single day you go in, or every time you have a meal, you should make a new bracha leisha b'sukkah. Marzutra said, Chazine leil Rapapi. I saw Rapapi. The whole aim is the manach tefillin. Anytime he put on the tefillin, mevarach, he would make a bracha. So again, the same idea. He held like Rabbeinu HaKadosh that every time you re-put the tefillin on, you have to make a new bracha. But Rabbanan de Bei Rav Ashi, the Rabbanan from the yeshiva of Rav Ashi, they held kol emes de mashmishi b'hu mevarche. So the way Tosfos explains, every time they touch their tefillin, they made a bracha. Now there is a halacha that a person, when he wears his tefillin, should often touch his tefillin. As you see in the siddur, it says at certain parts of the davening, touch your tefillin here and touch your tefillin there. So, but they wore the tefillin all day. Every now and then they would touch their tefillin, because you learn it from the tzitz, that you're supposed to remind yourself you're wearing the tefillin. So when each time they touched their tefillin, they made a bracha, not lahaniach tefillin, but lishmar chuka, which is a bracha that Chazal even established. You should make that bracha prior to taking off your tefillin. It was a bracha that is not so familiar, that we're not so familiar with regarding the tefillin. So they had this custom that every time they touched their tefillin, they made that kind of a bracha. Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, mitzvahs lulav kol shiva. The mitzvah of lulav is all 7 days. We saw that before. That the mitzvah to make a bracha on the lulav is every single day. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omar, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, like Rabbi Yochanan said, Yom Rishon mitzvahs lulav. I agree with you. The first day of Sukkot is a mitzvah to do lulav, and you make a bracha. Bikam ve'elach, from the first day and on, the next 6 days is a mitzvah zakenim. It's a mitzvah that came midrabanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established that mitzvah, and therefore we don't make a bracha. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kol Yomei mitzvah zakenim. Every day of Sukkot is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Every day of Sukkot, the Gemara challenges Rabbi Yitzchak's statement. What do you mean? Every day of Sukkot is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. V'afilu Yom Rishon, even the first day. V'kaimelam d'Yom Rishon d'Oraisa. We hold that Yom Rishon is d'Oraisa. The first day is Min HaTorah. It says L'kachtem Lechem b'Yom Rishon. So how could he say that every day is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan? Ema, what Rabbi Yitzchak said, bar Yom Rishon, except the first day. Every other day is only a d'Rabbanan. So if that's what Rabbi Yitzchak came to say, Hainu de Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that he's saying verbatim of what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. First day is d'Oraisa, all the other days are d'Rabbanan. So you have to read into the brisa, v'chein Omer Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak agreed with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and that's what he meant to say, that the first day is d'Rabbanan, the first day is d'Oraisa, and the rest of the days are d'Rabbanan. Okay. V'af Rav Sovar, Rav holds, the Gemara says, Kol Shiva mitzvahs lulav. Now, the point of all this is that would you make a bracha on a d'Rabbanan? The ones that hold that it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, but we don't make brachas on mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. But the Shmuel held that you do make a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, V'af Rav Sava, it must be that Rav holds also called Shiva mitzvah lulav, that all 7 days is a mitzvah of lulav. In other words, even Rav didn't really say it outright, but we find that Rav holds that mitzvahs d'Rabbanan you make a bracha. So therefore, it must be what we can derive from that is that since lulav during the other 7 days is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you would make a bracha. Where do we see that Rav held that you make a mitzvah under Rabbanan? The Amar Rav Chia Barashi Amar Rav. Rav Chia Barashi said the name Rav. Hamadlik ner shel Chanukah tzarich levarach. When you light the Chanukah, it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and you have to make a bracha. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, not only does the person that lights the ner Chanukah, but horoya ner shel Chanukah tzarich levarach. If you're walking on the street and you did not light ner Chanukah, and you see Chanukah lit in somebody's home, so then you make a bracha. Also, you're going to make the sha'asa nisim lavasenu. You're not going to say lahadlik ner Chanukah because you didn't light it. But if you're just looking at somebody's window and you see a ner Chanukah, you have to make a bracha. My mevarach. What is the brachas that you make on Chanukah? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said Yom Rishon, the first day, hamadlik marach shalish. The madlik, the person that lights, he makes 3 brachas. Lahadlik ner Chanukah, sha'asa nisim, and shehachianu. That's the first night. Horaya, but if you're a viewer, mevarach shtayim, you make 2 brachas. What are the 2 brachas? Sha'asa nisim shehachianu. If it's the first night and you're not going to light your Chanukah and Neiros, let's say you don't have a home, so that's the way we're going to explain it. Then you're going to say sha'asa nisim because you just saw somebody do it, and you say shehachianu. The kan ve'elach, but the rest of the days of Chanukah, madlik mevarach shtayim. The one that lights makes 2 brachas. He makes the lahadlik ner and sha'asa nisim. The roya mevarach achas, and the one who sees it doesn't. It just says sha'asa nisim lavasenu. And the Gemara says, "My mevarach, what is the bracha that you make for lighting Chanukah neres? Baruch asher kiddushon mitzvah b'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. It's a ner Chanukah. Some people shel Chanukah. So that's the bracha. So the Gemara asks, how could you make a bracha thanking Hashem for commanding us to light the ner of Chanukah when Hashem didn't command you? It's a d'Rabbanan. Where did God command us to light Chanukah neres? So the Gemara answers, "Mi loy soser." Torah says, don't deviate from what the Chachamim are going to tell you, right or left. You have to follow directions of the way they direct you. And therefore, if they invented, or so to speak, instituted this mitzvah Chanukah, you could make a bracha tzivanu because that is God's command to listen to the Chachamim. Rav Nachman Amar by Yitzchak Amar, the pasuk is another chumash. It says Sha'al avicha v'yageidcha, that you're supposed to ask your father and he should guide you. And it doesn't mean your physical father; it means your spiritual father, which is a chachamim. So that was the point. Since Rav would discuss that you're supposed to make brachas on Chanukah, so it must be that Rav also would hold that's just like you make a Chanukah, which is mitzvah Rabbanan, you would also make a bracha on mitzvah of lulav the rest of the days of Sukkot. Rav Nachman B'Yitzchak Masim Behedya. He had a definitive statement from Rav that Rav actually discussed lulav. And Amar Rav, he said, he heard from Rav, or he had a tradition that Rav actually said this, Kol Shivas Yamim Mitzvahs Lulav. All 7 days is a mitzvah to make a bracha on lulav. So that's the end of that sugya. The point I want to bring out that Tosfos again talks about how come by the mitzvah of Chanukah there's a bracha to be made when somebody views somebody doing the ner Chanukah. If you walk in the street and you see somebody lighting Chanukah, you're supposed to make a bracha. How come if you see somebody doing lulav or making a sukkah, you don't make a bracha? So that's the Tosfos on the bottom. So first Tosfos says because of the love of the nes, there was such a special nes. Again, Chachamim wanted to bring out the feeling in a person that even if you just view the neiros, you should make a bracha. And then Tosfos says, like I pointed out, there are plenty of people that don't even have homes and they're not going to be mekayim the mitzvah. So a person who's, let's say, in a hotel room or whatever, he's not going to be mekayim the mitzvah. So then he just takes a walk on the street and could just look up and find somebody else who lit, and he will be able to make a bracha as well. The Gemara continues. Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught, whoever makes a sukkah by himself, he makes a personal sukkah that he is going to sit in. He says, Baruch Shachiyanu, you make a Shachiyanu. V'nichnas leishev, if you sit to on the first day of Sukkot, the first time, Baruch Asher Kiddishanu. You make Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvayis tzvanu leishev basukah. So then Brisa continues. Hoysa asuya ba'omedes. If the sukkah was made, you came to a hotel and they had the sukkah there. Im yachol lechadish ba'davar. If you can add, let's say, a declaration and help out, mevarech, then you can make the bracha shachiyanu. right, helping out even before Sukkot. Im lav, if you can't, it's already made and there's nothing for you to add. So then make the Shechinyanu when you make Kiddush. When you come into the first night of Sukkot, you make 2 brachas. And that's what we do, because it came a time that we started to live in cities and most people were not building their own sukkahs. They actually had somebody else build a sukkah, and they would sit in a communal sukkah, like you have in apartment buildings. Therefore, it was pushed that nobody, from now on, nobody makes a bracha for their own personal sukkah. You make the bracha during the Kiddush on the first night of Sukkot. But technically, from the Gemara, it sounds like you should be making the bracha right when you're building the sukkah. Amar Rav Ashi says, Chazinile Rav Kahana, I saw Rav Kahana, the Ka'amalu Lukula Casa de Kedusha. He even wants to say that I saw Rav Kahana, although he built his own sukkah, that's the Kiddush, he would make all the Shechiyanos on the case of Kiddush, and that's what we do. I will point out a very important Taisus for Yediyas, that Taisus discusses how come there are some mitzvahs that we make a Shehechiyanu, and some mitzvahs that we don't make a Shehechiyanu. For example, first of all, Taisus says when you make a tzitzis, and when you make a tefillin, there's no Shehechiyanu there, right? And also, there's no Shehechiyanu by Mila. Yet, by Pidyon Ben, you make a Shehechiyanu. And then by Kriyas Megillah, you make a Shehechiyanu, but when you're reading Hallel, we don't make a Shehechiyanu. So what are the guidelines of when Chazal were making a Shehechiyanu, when or not? And I'll add one thing that Taisus doesn't discuss, is how come when you marry somebody and you're performing the mitzvah of Kedushin, you don't make a Shehechiyanu? So Taisus gives you a guideline that what his guidelines are, that only if there's a mitzvah that brings simcha, you make Shehechiyanu, right? Like you say when you buy a new item or you have a new fruit. And then it also, according to Rav Shri regarding, it has to be something that comes mizman lizman. So that takes care of Mila, because Mila is a once in a lifetime mitzvah, right? And therefore you don't make a Shehechiyanu. Also, is no simcha there, because for the father seeing his son in pain, maybe there's no simcha there. So those are the guidelines that Taisus says. But Taisus leaves off with a question of Pidyon Ben. Pidyon Ben is a once in a lifetime type of mitzvah. So why are we making a Shehechiyanu? Perhaps there's simcha there. So, but that doesn't answer the question of why by Kedushin we don't make a Shehechiyanu. So something to think about. Okay. The Gemara continues. Tanur Rabbanim taught. Of mitzvahs harbe. If you had a lot of mitzvahs, let's say it's Sukkot time, you have lulav esrig and you're sitting in a sukkah. So let's make one bracha for everything. Baruch Hashem al mitzvahs. You don't have to make a specific mitzvah on the lulav, the esrig, and the sukkah. You have to make a bracha on every mitzvah by itself. The Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda. You can't make like a shahakal to include like all mitzvahs. It has to be a mitzvah. Every mitzvah has its own bracha. My time to Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason, Rabbi Yehuda, you make a separate bracha for each mitzvah? The Ksiv, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. The Torah says, bless Hashem daily, each day. Does that mean you make a bracha only during the daytime, not in the nighttime? What does it mean? Bless Hashem every day. It's teaching you each day. Each day you have to make a separate bracha depending on the mitzvah of that day. And therefore, whatever the mitzvah is, it gets its own separate bracha. So the Hachanami, same over here. If it so happens that you piled on many mitzvahs at the same time, each item that you're going to perform a mitzvah with, you have to make its own separate bracha. So if you're sitting in a sukkah and holding your lulav and esrog, you'd have to make 2 brachas, one for sitting in the sukkah and one for holding the lulav and esrog. Now the Gemara, since Rab Zera said something in the name of Rab Chanina bar Papa, the Gemara brings another statement that he said, nothing related to what we're doing. The Amar Rab Zera v'Teimer Rab Chanina bar Papa. Boyere, come and see and observe. The way God runs the world and the way God created the world is not the way the character of humans. Okay, midas basar v'dam, the way the human psyche works. Kli reiken, if you have an empty vessel. We go to Menvav and Bebeis, Machzik. Then you could put stuff inside an empty vessel. Mali, but if it's filled to the brim, You can't put anything more because it's full. Whereas these are the laws of physics. Once something is full, it will not hold anything further. God created, which is beyond the laws of physics. And mole machsa, and what the Gemara is saying is that if you are full, it means you made sure to learn Torah when you were younger, and you filled yourself up with a lot of Torah when you were younger, machsek, you will find that you'll be able to have the ability to learn more Torah. In other words, you'll expand the volume of your knowledge, and you'll be able to hold on to learn new things. But Raycon, if you didn't accustom yourself, you were empty when you were younger, you didn't make any time when you were younger to learn, then it's very hard to start when you're late. Eine machzik. It's very difficult to hold any Torah. Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'hoya im shemoya tishma." Im shemoya, if you listened when you were younger, you put in the effort, tishma, then you will listen when you were older. V'im lav, if you didn't pay attention when you were younger, loy tishma, what it implies, it's going to be very difficult for you to learn. Of course, it's always good to start at any time of life to begin to learn, but it's much easier if a person put in a lot of time when he was younger and just kept on expanding on it, and you'll see that when a person expands on it, his brain expands along with it, and he can hold more Torah. So that's the first way to learn V'hoim Shmaya. That's the V'hoim Shmaya that we read every night in Kriya Shema. Davar Acha, another interpretation of what V'hoim Shmaya means to say is nothing to do with that. It's a new interpretation. Im Shmaya B'yashin, if you review your learning, whatever you learned, old, Tishma B'chodesh, you'll see new ideas from the learning that you learned previously. So if you review something, all of a sudden you'll see something you did not see before. There's no such a thing of learning something completely. It's impossible. You learn something and then you could learn it again and you see something different. And you find that anybody who studies Chumash and Rashi, so you could learn the same Chumash and the same Rashi from year to year, and all of a sudden, each year you see something different, even though you've learned this hundreds of times before. And that's the nature of Torah. That you review the old and you see something new. But if you give up on what you learned, in other words, you're not going to review. You say, I know it already. Shuv lo tishma. You'll not even hold that. You'll not see any new items, and you'll just lose what already you learned. The Mishnah said, Miyad Tanoikis, one more piece of the Gemara. Miyad Tanoikis, that the adults would grab at the end of the Chag in the Beis Hamikdash, when they finished Lulav and Esrog on the seventh day, the adults would grab from the hands of the children their Esrog and eat it. Right? They would grab it out of the children's hands and said, "You don't eat it," and just eat the Esrogs from the children's hands. That's how it was in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, some others say that Rashi brings down a story over here, and just to prove away, the Rashi brings a story and to prove away that miyad means from the hands of the children, because Rashi brings that there was a person that it's a very interesting Rashi. If you get a chance to look it over, Rashi says there was a chassid that gave a little extra money to a poor person on maybe for Sukkot, and his wife could not take it, and he's giving tzedakah, and she got into a big fight with him, and he had to run away from his house, and he had no way to make a living. So on the seventh day of Yom Tiv, he took an esrog from one of the children, and he got on a ship, and he happened to make his way to a distant place, and the king was very sick, and he was looking for a citron, an esrog, that will bring him a heal, bring him a refuah. So he was able to sell the only esrog that he had, that he took on this trip, for an exorbitant amount of money, and he came back to his home as a rich person. So that's what it was. We see from this that the story that Miyad Tanakis, the Gedolim, would grab the esrog, even if it's not your own child, you just grab the esrog from his hand. It was understood that the Gedolim, and they would eat the esrog right there in the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yochanan said, esrog bashvi aser. The whole day of Hoshana Rabbah, you're not allowed to benefit from the esrog, because it was a mitzvah. Done with it, you have to wait. Bashmini mutar, but on Shmini Atzeres, the next day, it's mutar. Sukkah, Sukkah, you're not allowed to benefit from the sukkah. Afilu b'shmini asura. Even on the 8th day, where we don't sit in the sukkah in Israel, you're not allowed to touch the sukkah. Any part of the sukkah is muktzah. Resh Lakish says esrog afilu b'shvi'i nami moter. Esrog even on the 7th day is also permitted. Now, even on the 7th day, after the mitzvah is done, b'mayim becoming palgi. What's Resh Lakish disagreeing with Rabbi Yochanan? According to Resh Lakish, on the 7th day, right away in the morning, you're allowed to benefit from the esrog. What's the argument about? According to Shlokish, what makes the esrog you're not allowed to benefit from is as long as you set it aside to do a mitzvah. But once you did the mitzvah on Hoshana Rabbah in the morning, the 7th day of Sukkot in the morning, already right after that, it becomes permitted to benefit from. Since you could technically perform the mitzvah of esrog anytime during the day, technically, usually it was performed in the morning, but technically you can do it anytime in the day. Therefore, the whole day of Hoshana Rabbah, you're not allowed to benefit from the esrog. So Esrei Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So Rish Lakish has an obvious question to Rabbi Yochanan. The Mishnah says, the adults would take the children that were in the base of Migdash, and they would grab their lulav and throw it down. And we eat the esrogs of the children. So you see a lot of benefit from the esrog of a children. Now you're going to say it was a child's esrog, so it wasn't such a kosher esrog. My love, doesn't the Mishnah said hu adin l'gdolim, that they would eat the esrogs belonging to the adults? So the Gemara says, "Loi, not so. Tinoikis dafka. They would only eat, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the esrog of an adult is muktzah. You're not permitted, it's set aside. You're not permitted to benefit from on 7th day of Sukkot. But from the children's esrogs, you're allowed to. Others had this version of how the question was asked, but same idea. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question just the opposite to Rish Lakish. So the Mishnah says only from the children the adults would eat the esrogs. Tinoikis and G'dolim loy. The children's esrog you're permitted to eat. The adult's esrog you're not permitted to eat. And so that's a question against Rish Lakish, who said, no, an adult's esrog, after the mitzvah is done, you're allowed to benefit from. So the Gemara said, of course, the Mishnah is talking about even for Gedolim, you're allowed to benefit from. The reason why it discussed the children, that was the story. No one wanted to grab the adult's esrog because everybody wanted to bring it home, but the children didn't need their esrog, so the adults would go over to a child and say, give me your esrog and I'll eat it now. But basically, that's the machlokes. Whether an esrog is also the whole day or just after to the mitzvah. Amalei Rapapa said to Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, esrog is also on the 7th day, okay, but it's mutter on the 8th day because you don't perform the mitzvah of lulav on the 8th day. So why is it Maishna is sukkah? Why is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, sukkah, you're not allowed to have benefit from the sukkah? In other words, you can't take apart your sukkah or use some of the schach as firewood if you need it. On the 8th day of Sukkah, why does the Sukkah remain muktzah on Shmini Atzeres when you're not using the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres? Why is esrog permitted on Shmini Atzeres? According to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan said, Sukkah dechazi lebein hashmashos, Sukkah at the era of Shmini Atzeres after sunset, technically it's suffix daytime, suffix nighttime. When it's twilight. Still, the Sramile Sudase Boya Mesa Begava Mecha Begava. If you decide to eat a meal, you still would have to eat in a meal, even though it's after sunset on the 7th day. So technically, during that twilight period prior to the 8th night, you were going to eat in a sukkah. So therefore, since the sukkah was already set aside as muktzah, during twilight it was set aside. Since it was set aside for the bein hashmashos, twilight, so the whole day of sukkah is asur to benefit from the sukkah. Esrog, generally, like I'm trying to tell you, generally esrog was done during the morning. Therefore, in twilight, you're not shaking the esrog, lulav and esrog. So therefore, the loichas lebein hashmashos, you're not going to use the lulav and esrog during twilight sign. Generally, so therefore it's not set aside during twilight, and therefore it's not muktzah the whole day of Shmini. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan held that the esrog is also the entire 7th day. Shmini Atzeres, it's mutter. Sukkah is also even on Shmini Atzeres, although you're not using the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, you can't take off a piece of the schach and use it as firewood. And the reason is because since the day before, during twilight, technically you needed a sukkah, so therefore it's muktzah for the entire day. Another few more lines. The Levi said esrog afilu b'shmini asr. Levi said esrog is also even on the 8th day. So he holds that the esrog, if b'diavad you didn't perform the mitzvah Hashana Rabbah of esrog, you would do it on during twilight. So even esrog is also on the 8th day of sukkah. Avur Shmuel says esrog b'shvi asr. Esrog is also on the 7th day, like Rabbi Yochanan. B'shmini mutar, the shmini is permitted. So Avur Shmuel held like Rabbi Yochanan. But then he changed his mind. Come Avud Shmuel b'shitza de Levi. Avud Shmuel changed his mind and he held like Levi that esrog is also even on Shmini Atzeres. You shouldn't benefit from the esrog even on Shmini Atzeres. Come Rab Zera b'shitza de Avud Shmuel. Rab Zera went like the original opinion of Avud Shmuel, which was that only on the 7th day an esrog is also, on the 8th day it's muta. How do you know? Rabbi Zera said esrog shnifsula, esrog that became invalidated. Also, kol shiva, you're not allowed to eat it on the whole 7th day, but on the 8th day you're permitted. So Rav Shmuel and Reb Zera held almost the same thing. The original opinion of Rav Shmuel that only on the 7th day an esrog is also, and not on the 8th day. All right, let's stop over here. This is a new sugya, not an interesting halacha. We'll start from Amar Reb Zera. Lot to learn today.
Baruch, quick question. You said that there is a bracha that is made when you remove your tefillin?
Yes, there was a bracha in the Gemara. It's not done today. It's called Lishmar Chukav, right? We say it in the Volotzian like a hint to it. Right? That's what we say, Nishmar Chukav, because there was a bracha originally in the Gemara that said that when you take off your tefillin, you should say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shomer Chukav. Let's just see it in Taisvis.
You said that sometimes the word is filmed the whole day and they touched it often.
Right, exactly. So let's see that right over here. The Chol Amos de Mishamshi. This is the Taisus where my finger is. And then Taisus says, Mustavra at the end where my pointer is, the Mevorchem Lishmar Chukav. You make a bracha Lishmar Chukav. Kamoy Shemavorchen Lishmar, you make that bracha Lishmar Chukav, Bosser, after the Misalkin Tfilasai. After you remove your tefillin, you make that bracha. This bracha is actually not brought in Masechta Brachas, where it should be. It's discussed in Masechta Nida. But today, I don't know, for one reason, this bracha was dropped from our vocabulary, and nobody, I know that makes a bracha Lishmar Chukav, but people in Halach, it says, don't take your tefillin off until you say the Yavolat Tzion, that's when you should take your tefillin off, because that was the bracha for after tefillin.
But that is not done today. Do you do that? Do you do that?
No, of course not. No, I don't know. Nobody I know does that. But that's Taisvis brought it.
Okay, another quick question. Where did you say they wore that film the whole day and they touched it off? And where was this?
Right over here. The Gemara says over here that right over here, in the middle of the page, about the middle of the page, the line starts, Rabbanan the Bei Rav Ashi, the Rabbanan that learned in Yeshiva Rav Ashi, called Amos, anytime the Mash Mishay Behu Bevarchi. Whenever they touched their tefillin, they made a bracha. Because we're discussing whenever you go to the bathroom and you interrupt your tefillin, you make a new bracha lohaniach tefillin. They went one step further, that anytime they touched their tefillin during the day, they made a bracha. The mamash mishay, they make a bracha. Now, obviously, they're not making a bracha to put on tefillin because the tefillin was on.
Right.
They had to make another bracha lishma chukav.
I see. And but he said that they wore this film the whole day.
Yes, I mean that was common practice in the times of the Tanaim Aroim, and there are people today that wear the tefillin the whole day.
Yeah, I've seen that actually. Can you do me a favor? Can you go back to the beginning of the Gemara? I want to take a picture of it because I want to make sure that I go over the whole thing.
I'll email it to you.
Oh, even better. Oh,
I'll email it.
You're one.
Okay. I'll email it right after.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Baruch.
A gute Nacht, everybody.
A gute Nacht. Sei gesund.
Sei gesund, everybody.
Take care, Baruch.
Bye.